Hey friends, my name is Zara and this is the Daydreaming Wolves podcast, in which I talk about folk herbalism, the tarot, trauma-informed magic, as well as the politics of healing and small business adventures. Sometimes it's just me sharing rituals and inspiration, and sometimes I have beautiful like-minded guests on the show. If you would like to learn more about my work, you can visit daydreamingwolves.com for all things magic and sarahmagdalenalove.com for web design and tech support. Feel free to subscribe on iTunes, and if you like my podcast, know that a review would really be appreciated. This is just a quick note before we go onto the show to tell you about something new that I'm offering. So in the last couple of weeks, I've done a lot of becoming magic readings and really loved expanding them into creating little unique rituals for you. And while I totally love this work and will continue offering it, I also really care about making my work more financially accessible. So I've put something together that I called the Roots and Boundaries Ritual Kit, which is virtual and you can download it right away. So it's meant to be offering you a framework and some inspiration to create a ritual in which you can really ground deeper into yourself and your own boundaries. It includes an audio intro, an audio on herbal recipes for grounding and boundaries, some ritual ideas, a Roots and Boundaries tarot spread, a guided visualization, some spoken and written journaling prompts, as well as a Spotify playlist. It's $11 and you can find it on daydreamingwolves.com under offerings. And if this isn't affordable to you, please just send me a message and I will send you a voucher. Thank you so much, and now on to today's show. Hey everyone, as always, I'm saying again that I'm really excited about the person I have on the show today, and as always, it's true. So I really have to come up with something more unique to say, but I am just excited. It's a really great guest. So I have Langston Kahn with me today. He is a Black queer shamanic practitioner based in New York, and I first came across his work through the Bespoken Bones podcast, which I really recommend if you're into sexual well-being and ancestral work. That's a really beautiful, amazing, inspiring resource. And I've asked Langston to be on the show today, and he said yes, so that's amazing. I have a bunch of questions, and I also feel it's like a really beautiful time of the year to speak about this ancestral work and healing, because we're recording this at the end of October. So that is my little fangirl intro. I'm gonna hand over now so that you can introduce yourself. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Sarah. It's so good to be on the show with you. I guess in terms of an introduction, as you said, I'm now a Queens-based shamanic practitioner in New York, and my work is sort of split into two main modalities. One side of the work that I do is really focused on emotional healing work, helping people to engage with triggers or trauma or stuck patterns that are popping up in their life and engage with the wisdom of their body to allow them to track those instances to their root where they first started and then clear it there at the root. So sort of using the discomfort in the moment that they're experiencing in their life as a breadcrumb trail back to the original trauma, so they can then actually clear that old stuck pattern there and fully move themselves into present time, so their present life is no longer being affected or limited by the pain they've experienced in their past. Yeah. And then the other aspect of my work is the more shamanic side of things, that you might say, which is focused on engaging with the things that you can't access simply through the body. Stuff like soul loss, where a part of yourself during a moment of trauma has become lost in space and time, so to speak. And so I'm going into a trance state and moving into the spirit world to retrieve that part of that person. And explaining to them what age it was when it left and why it left, so they can then begin to reintegrate that part of themselves into their life. That also might include things like ancestral healing, like you were talking about, really going to the root of patterns in someone's life that are in the ancestral realms, and clearing and transforming and shifting those so the person can transform those in their own life. And and also kind of the miscellaneous categories of whatever's needed to help a person realign with the energy of their purpose that they came here to live on this
Mm.
earth. So that might include sort of energy healing, or bringing back helping spirits they're meant to be working with, or removing intrusive spirits, or doing sort of cleansings and work like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. I want to add something that you said on the Bespoken Bones podcast, which is that you believe that no trauma or emotional pain is beyond healing, and I thought that was so beautiful.
Yeah, and I don't say that as a mandate, so heal your trauma now or else, but I sort of say that just because I think often in Western culture, if a practitioner or professional doesn't have the tools to help provide healing for something, they are very quick to say this is unhealable.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for us to empower ourselves to follow the path of our own healing and trust that there is a way we can always be moving back
Mm.
more into balance, more into wholeness, more into a feeling of being held in our
Mm.
life and in our body. And that what that looks like is different for everyone. But in my experience, um, there's always some kind of forward movement that's held within our wounds, because if they didn't know what healing and wholeness felt like, the wounds wouldn't know what pain felt like.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. I needed to hear that this week. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that's okay, I would love to go one step back. I loved your sharing about your work. And usually, the first question I ask my guests is where they are in the world right now, which you already mentioned. And then my next question would be kind of what is nature like around you right now? I feel that is really beautiful for people to know kind of where you're grounded at the moment, and what the trees look like.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Right now, the trees are still green for the most part, even though it's October, because it's been unseasonably warm here. We've kind of been getting August weather in late October, which is kind of scary.
Yeah.
But today is the first chilly day in a while, so I'm kind of excited about that. It finally is starting to feel like fall.
Yeah. Cool, thanks. My next question is, I'm wondering, I can imagine that some listeners will feel really inspired by what you just said, and um, depending on where they're at in their life right now, sometimes I know that for myself is true. Feels really hard to imagine how someone can come to do this work, and it feels really far away. So I would love to know what kind of your first experience with spirituality and healing was, and when you knew that this would become such an important part of your journey.
Hmm. So I had a lot of experiences with spirituality fairly early on, because my dad is a Zen Buddhist priest,
Mm-hmm.
and my mother is a fairly gifted healer.
Mm.
Um, but I think the first moment I remember really consciously choosing spirituality in a sense, was my parents were looking for some kind of religion for us to be a part of, my sister and I, because they knew they wanted us to have some way of connecting in community
Mm-hmm.
with the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just were going to these different churches and different organizations and looking for something that felt right for us as a family at the time. And they really wanted my sister and I to be in charge of guiding what we enjoyed, which I think was really wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, and where we settled on was a Unitarian church.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really a wonderful place. It was where some of my first exposure to paganism was, actually, because there was like a women's wisdom circle that led a big, beautiful Yule ritual
Mm.
every year. And so that was when I first began to feel like what that could be like, um, which is really important for me. But also, even more importantly, they had like two or three different Sunday school classes that kids could choose from, which I think is kind of amazing. I'm not sure
Yeah.
how they were supporting all that. But the one that I chose, I remember being so clear about this, was called Honoring Our Mother Earth. And
Mm.
it was a class taught by this woman who guided little kids in sort of basic shamanic practices. Like we were drawing medicine cards to see what our animal was. We were making little medicine wheels for those animals. We were learning like songs about the earth, sort of like pagan chants and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and doing guided visualizations and meditations. And that for me, I lost it later on for a period of time, but that was my first real connection to, oh wow, there's this different way of engaging with the numinous that's very grounded
Yeah.
in the earth here and now,
Yeah.
and not something separate.
Yeah, amazing. I'm really glad you had that experience. Yeah, I wish I could say the same for myself. That's amazing. Well done for your parents.
Yeah.
My next question would be, you mentioned you kind of lost touch with these practices for some time, and I can of course also relate to that. So I'm wondering, currently, kind of what are your most favorite or most treasured spiritual or it might be the same self-care practices that kind of keep you engaged and close to that experience?
hmm Yeah, and I realized I didn't answer one other part of your other question,
Oh.
which was about so when did I know it would become such a
Oh
central
yeah.
part of my path?
Yeah.
And so just to go back to that for a moment, because I
Mm-hmm.
think it ties in with this question as well, is I found Wicca later on, partly probably because of those early experiences with the Women's Wisdom Circle and the Unitarian Church,
Mm-hmm.
and I started a little coven with my friends, and what I found there was just this sense of connection to some, again, that connection to the numinous that felt kind of subtle, kind of like I wasn't even sure if I necessarily believed it existed at that time. I knew it felt important to me, it felt true, but there
Yeah.
was still so much doubt around
Mm.
it as well. Because as we get older, we do lose touch with these things a bit. Like when I was little, my parents would find me just talking to invisible people all the time,
Yeah.
some of whom are helping spirits now.
Yeah.
But as you get older, it's especially in a Western materialist culture, it's very hard to maintain that. So I had somehow preserved this sense of magic as something that was real and
Mm.
true, but I at the same time didn't really have visceral, clear experiences of it. In my own life. So it almost became like a religion for me in the sense that I believe this thing to be true, but I didn't have a visceral felt experience of it.
Yeah.
Um, so I was always drawn to these sort of I never know how to say this word, quixotic characters,
Yeah.
like Don Quixote or like other similar characters who have this vision that they feel pulling them forward, and it's completely different than what the world tells them is possible around them, and
Mm.
and they might be even misguided in some aspects of it, but it still carries them along on this journey. I've always really resonated with characters like that,
Mm-hmm.
and that was very much my experience. So Wicca was one of the places I began to rekindle that connection. And then I practiced a little more seriously after college. Because for many
Mm-hmm.
of my friends, witchcraft had just been like an identity for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of fell away as they got older. But for me, it was an identity, but I realized I also wanted it to be a grounded practice.
Yeah.
So I began to seek out a teacher who could help me make that transition and really actually seriously approach these tools and techniques and way of being in the world.
Yeah.
Um, and I won't go too in depth into that, but um, that was very transformative for me and really opened up this floodgate of, oh my God, there's a whole world, an ecology out here of different traditions and ways of engaging with the spirit world that all have different aspects of truth and different strengths and weaknesses. And I began exploring a lot of different traditions at that time, shortly after college. Like,
Mm-hmm.
one weekend going to like a Northern tradition pagan house, the next exploring African diasporic traditions, and engaging with like Zulu Sangomas and
Mm.
part of sweat lodge communities. Like, it was just like suddenly there was this opening, and all these people started coming into my life, and I started seeking out these things as well very actively.
Yeah.
Um, but after a while, the more I moved into witchcraft being less of an identity for me and more of a practice,
Mm-hmm.
the more that I started having these initiatory experiences outside of my time with my coven, through dreams, through coincidences, through strange, waking visions, and it started to feel like Wicca was my religion, and my spiritual life was happening somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I eventually did leave my coven. Um, and what I realized as I was leaving, also sort of happening parallel at the same time as I was engaging in these initiatory experiences and starting to really take seriously my own healing process, what I realized was that I was really, what had always driven me to these traditions was not just the love of magic and the numinous and ecstasy, but a real pain around the suffering I saw my friends in. Um,
Mm.
like the people I was always drawn to throughout my life were people who were often like intensely creative, and fun and funny, but they were self-medicating. They had various types of mental challenges.
Mm.
Um, they were, self-harming in different ways, um, and just really struggling with being in the world, in a sense, of
Mm.
being a human being. And the people that I didn't see struggling that way, I was much less interested in because they just seemed it seemed like they were fitting in really well with a kind of sick system in a
Mm.
sense.
Yeah.
Um, and so that I realized what I really wanted to know is why is this? Why is it that I see my friends in so much pain
Mm.
and none of the adults in my life seem to have any answers? Not even professionals like psychotherapists in my life at the time seem to have, because my dad is also a psychotherapist,
Mm.
um, seem to have answers for them or seem to really be able to help them.
Mm.
And the adults seem to be in a lot of pain as well, for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so the first place I really started to find answers to those questions was through, one of my primary teachers, Christina Pratt, and her podcast Why Shamanism Now, where she was
Mm.
talking a lot about, um, how what happens when, as a culture, we stop tending birth, we
Mm.
stop reminding children, before they come here, asking them what they need, through trance states, and preparing the way for them to come, and understanding what purpose and gifts they're bringing to the community to share, so we can support them in bringing those gifts to the community.
Yeah.
When we stop initiating, children into adulthood formally, so they can
Mm.
drop the baggage of their childhood and again step back even more into that energy of purpose. When we stop tending death and helping people to move on in a good way, and if they haven't moved on in a good way, then, supporting them in as a community and as an individual spirit in clearing and cleansing those patterns that are keeping them stuck.
Yeah.
Um, and just seeing that, and when we forget ritual, like when we lose all these things, essentially I think this is what happens, these this rising rates of, mental unwellness every
Mm.
year, you know just people feeling a sense of disconnection and meaninglessness often in their life, and just the intense focus on consumption for the sake of consumption.
Yeah.
So this isn't to idealize, um, indigenous cultures, as some, like, perfect system,
Mm.
but they did manage to last on this earth in balance and harmony with the earth a lot longer than we
Mm.
have using our modern Western scientific materialist principles.
Yeah. Yeah.
About 200 years, we've undone a lot, a lot of things.
Yeah.
Um, and I think what we're being tasked with, in a sense, and I guess what really made me realize this was going to be a central part of my path, is that I felt personally tasked with figuring out how do we, as a people, as Western contemporary people, how do we learn to find our way back to some of these important parts of being human that allow us to be human in co-creation with the spirit world and with the earth in a good way, while also not trying to regress or go back to some imaginary idyllic state. Like, how do we really bring forward what we've learned from
Mm.
all that we've done, the good and the bad, and weave that together with these older ways of being in the world that are really tried and true and tested, um, to find, more balance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Can we come back to the question of self-care practices, and maybe can you tell us a little bit more on a day-to-day basis what that looks like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, a little lost there. So, um,
So many good, I mean, lots of deep shit questions, eh?
yeah, totally. Uh, so with self-care practices, on a daily basis, a lot of my work is starting out at my ancestor altar. That's really important to me. That's like probably the one thing that no matter what's going on in my day, I will find time to do that.
Mm.
Um, and that took time. I don't necessarily advocate that that's everyone's first self-care practice, but that because it first took for me really cultivating a healthy relationship with my ancestors before I felt the influx of energy and love and intention and focus for my day that I get now from that
Mm.
altar practice. At the beginning, it kind of just felt like a burden and an obligation because there were so many distorted patterns that were kind of weighing that relationship down.
Yeah.
But so anyway, to about the self care, I start just praying to my ancestor helping spirits. We have a prayer in my shamanic community that goes, I ask that all that is good come to me, so I'm supported in my own goodness. I ask that
Mm.
all that is true come to me, so I feel my truth and have the courage to live it. I ask that all that is beautiful come to me, so I have the power to create beauty in the world. And I ask that all that is wise come to me, so I gain from the wisdom of those who have gone before me.
Mm.
And so I start with making some offerings that my ancestors like, and say that prayer. And then it gets a little more loose depending on the day. Some days I'm, talking about my life, talking about what I'm going to be doing that day, asking for help and guidance. Some days I'm just opening up and listening to what they have to say to me right now. But that really helps me orient myself for the day.
Mm.
Then
Yeah.
after that, it really depends on if it's a day that I'm seeing clients or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially clients for shamanic journeying work, because then my self-care practices have to get a lot more thorough in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so what that might look like is doing an altar practice that is at my main altar that kind of holds my whole cosmology
Mm-hmm.
in it, and really calling in the energies that I'm wanting to engage with for the day. So I'm not just stuck with the energies everyone else is called in. Um, and really putting myself firmly at the center of that altar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I feel held by all the directions and all my helping spirits and all the elements. And seeing if they have guidance for me for the day.
Yeah.
And making offerings to my helping spirits and talking to them. Because I have a lot of my shrines around my house that I'm tending
Mm-hmm.
at different times. Um, and outside of tending spirit relationships, also energy practice is really important for me. I've been doing a lot of qigong, especially in the last year, um, which is a Taoist form of
Mm-hmm.
energy management that really focuses on allowing sort of nature and the natural flow of things to teach us how to move our own energy in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I have a qigong practice. I also exercise is really important to me. Daily exercise, like something a little more strenuous, like intense aerobic exercise or weightlifting, just because if I have a full client day, I might be spending uh, a large part of my day either sitting in a chair or literally lying down with my eyes closed as I'm in trance. So if I'm not having some intense, vigorous physical movement that really moves my blood and moves my body and makes me sweat in my day, that just can get very taxing on my body. And also, I'm not as good when I don't do that because um, it's hard for your body, I think, to feel safe, really allowing yourself to go deep in that way into trance when it doesn't know you're also going to move it
Yeah.
and bring it to expression. It's kind of that sort of complementary dualism, yin and yang kind of thing. You need both aspects.
Yeah.
And then I guess the core practice of self-care that I have is the emotional clearing techniques that my techniques are a combination of what I learned from inner relationship focusing and also what I learned from Christina Pratt through the cycle teaching, which involve, again, that sense of tracking my whatever triggers are popping up or whatever's going on in my energy body at the moment and allowing the wisdom of my body to guide me in clearing those at the root. And so that might involve me, talking to it might involve me doing that on my own or also doing that once a week at least with other people in my community that support me in that process and I support them. So I have that larger container to process whatever's going on for me. And I find that's really important, especially when I started doing working as a shamanic practitioner full time, because so often I just find the more you do that work, the faster life expects you to engage with it as a teacher. The faster you're expected to notice when patterns are popping up and deal with those patterns instead of waiting for a long time, because they blow up in your face pretty quick when you're trying to help other people through transformational processes and hold a good container for their work. So often I find clients reflecting back to me issues that I'm currently facing in my life and needing to really work through those patterns myself and pay attention so I can be clear and show up for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love that you said you have an altar that kind of holds your whole cosmology. That is very impressive. I would love to see what that looks like. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it can be very simple. It's not that complex. My current altar, it's evolved and changed as altars do over the years, but my current altar is just a table or a dresser that has 4 candles, which represent the 4 directions and 4 elements in my cosmology. There's a plant at the center, and there's different medicine objects in each direction, which hold different energies for me that I might want to call in at different times throughout my day. And so when I say it has my whole cosmology on it, that's what I mean, that it has different representations of the energies I work with in each aspect of my cosmology, and it has those major sort of quadrants of the cosmology of the directions and the elements. So I can use that as sort of a manifestation tool as well in my day. Like if I know today I'm really working on holding the intention of clarity. Like I've been confused about some things. I really need to sort of pierce whatever fog of confusion I felt I've been in. I might put that object that holds the energy of clarity for me at the center of that altar. So I'm communicating really clearly to the spirit world, this is what I need help with this day. This is what I'm focused on.
Yeah. Can you tell me, maybe tell us a little bit more about inner relationship focusing as well, and what that means to you?
Absolutely. So inner relationship focusing is a technique that was developed by Anne Weiser Cornell. And before her, focusing was developed by Eugene Genlin, who is a psychotherapist who, after observing many different therapeutic sessions, doing this really incredible research, he realized that a client's ability to create lasting positive change in a therapy session depended on their ability to access a nonverbal bodily feel of the issues that have brought them into therapy. And he called this the felt sense. And I see a lot of people using the word felt sense without realizing that Eugene Genlin coined that term, because it's almost moved into the collective consciousness now. But so focusing and subsequently inner relationship focusing are both centered on helping us to connect with that felt sense in the body, that sort of vague, pre-verbal, beyond words sense of something, that wisdom that our body holds, and find ways of engaging with that felt sense to allow it to open and share with us its wisdom.
Mm. Yeah, amazing. I tried to kind of create beautiful bridges to the next question, but I'm not sure it really works with this one. What advice would you give someone who's really just starting out and maybe listening to this and feels really inspired but doesn't really know kind of where to start and wants to maybe work with trauma, maybe with ancestors or both, but yeah, where to start? What do you think is a good idea for people to do?
hmm It's a great question. I think it's really different for everyone. But one thing that can help point us the way is our life.
Mm.
What is the specific trauma that you've experienced, or the specific patterns you're noticing in your life right now that either are most exciting you, making you feel most curious and passionate about them, or the things that are most making you feel frustrated and stuck. And
Mm.
really starting there with your own life and allowing that to guide you in what you choose to pursue. I think often people want to jump or leap ahead to like intense spiritual contact or um, you know identifying as a teacher or healer very quickly. And I think that's a very quick way to strangle the life out of our spirituality and create a lot of new problems for ourselves in addition to the ones we're already facing.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I don't say that in any judgmental way. I think, it's a natural inclination in the culture we're in to move into that because there is so much pressure to only do something if you can in some way eventually turn it into a source of income.
Mm.
Um, but what I would suggest is that one thing one of my helping spirits said to me was that I was just a little overwhelmed. This is like maybe like 5 years ago or something. I was overwhelmed with all of the options available to me of the different healing modalities that I could choose to learn or engage in.
Yeah.
And what helping spirit said to me is, because I knew I was being guided to do some kind of healing work at that time, but I had no idea what. And so they said, really look at what has helped you,
Mm.
what has actually brought healing in your life, and begin to pursue that and train in that modality, whatever it is, first.
Mm.
Because we can't, lead where we haven't followed.
Yeah.
So I guess I suggest that you find a modality or way of working that feels like it's beginning to address some of the current challenges or issues that you're facing in your life. And again, that's going to be different for everyone. But rather than approaching spiritual life as a kind of escape, really first approach it as a way to engage with a different perspective with the challenges you're currently facing, to allow your spirituality to deepen your intimacy with your life rather than be an escape from it.
Mm.
And I guess, if I was going to give one small practice that would be good for probably anyone, it's grounding.
Mm.
Um, and I think a lot of people hate that advice because it can seem kind of boring and it can seem kind of vague as to what you're actually being asked to do at first. Um, but I would say grounding uh, can be a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but for the most part, it's something that anchors you in your body and then through your body anchors you into the earth and the
Mm.
energy of the earth, wisdom of the earth, and nourishment of the earth.
Yeah.
So there's different Taoist forms you can do for that. Yoga can help with grounding. Meditation can help a lot with grounding, but just taking on some practice that allows you to rest into your body just
Mm.
as it is in the present moment. I think that's a really strong foundation for anyone wanting to engage in a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Uh, and the other aspect of that that's maybe a little more fun is shamanic journeying. For me, that was a big game changer because it's a place to begin to cultivate an intimate relationship with divinity and the spirit world that's not relying on anybody except yourself
Mm.
to to engage in it, which I think is really powerful and can be really life changing.
Yeah.
And so I actually on my blog I have a um, little post about how to start shamanic journeying,
Mm-hmm.
um, if that's something that interests people. And I also included in that post uh, a list of podcasts from Why Shamanism Now that I think are really helpful resources when you're starting a shamanic journeying practice.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I will definitely listen. I hadn't heard about the podcast before, and podcasts at the moment are a really primary source of inspiration for me. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, there's something really special about just connecting with someone on this level of voice and
Yeah,
audio.
yeah,
It's a
I
little
agree.
different than reading a book. Yeah.
Totally. And I love that there's so little else going on that we don't need visuals as well. And,
Mm.
you can take that podcast into a really private space. You don't have to leave the house, which is, that can be great sometimes. But yeah, yay for podcasts.
Yeah, in a sense, it's almost like the modern oral tradition, I find. Like just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh,
Um,
finding ways of transferring wisdom to each other.
yeah, yeah, totally. Speaking of inspiring things, what do you feel is inspiring you the most at the moment?
That's a great question. I think I've been really inspired lately by meeting people who are committed to leadership in service of their communities
Mm-hmm.
and community visions.
Mm-hmm.
Visions that are bigger than themselves, bigger than anything one person could completely bring into the world.
Yeah.
Um, and that's something that I do that's very important to me. I'm my so the Last Mask community is a shamanic community I'm part of, which also supports the shamanic teachings I moved through. And I'm on the leadership council of that community.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole community is volunteers that have come together to help bring forward this vision of what it might look like to live as a non-local community that's engaging with indigenous beliefs and principles.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's been a big part of my life. And I think I find myself really inspired when I'm seeing people doing it on the local, in-person level as well.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like, for example, I have one friend who is part of the Hip Hop Dance Conservatory,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing really beautiful work. I won't go too deep into this, don't want to sidetrack too much, but what really inspired me about them is they're really dancers as whole human beings in a way that much of the dance world does not.
Mm-hmm.
Much of the dance world seems to approach them just as people who can be sort of used and then tossed away in a sense when they get too old.
Yeah.
We're really looking at education. How do we train the mind of a dancer? How do we train the body of a dancer? How do we train like nutrition and physical well-being of a dancer? And what they're doing is things like community food programs, similar to what the Black Panthers did, making this thing called Dance Smart, where anyone can come and get supplemental groceries for their week.
Mm.
Also learn like a cooking demonstration to make a nutritional meal,
Yeah.
the groceries that they bought. And I just see, I guess what I'm getting to with this example is I'm really inspired by people who are showing up without worrying about money being the primary goal to
Mm.
serve a vision that's bigger than themselves, that really is the change they're wanting to see in the world.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's great. I don't want to overstretch your time, but I would love to ask you one more question. And that would be, can you maybe share with us what your hope and your visions and your dreams for our collective healing at the moment are?
Absolutely. Um, I guess it's very much to do with what I was speaking about before, that I would love if we were able to bring forward and bring back, and some people are already doing this, ways of tending birth, initiation, and death collectively as a culture,
Mm-hmm.
and really respecting that as a value and something that's needed. Not because, for so many thousands of years, humans understood that that was needed. And I think it's a little arrogant to think that somehow we've evolved past those things being important.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot easier now that we see so much crumbling around us to see, wait a second, something's missing.
Mm-hmm.
Than maybe it was in the past when it was easier to keep up the illusion a bit that everything was fine going on as business as usual.
Yeah.
So that's one of my dreams. Another thing is that, well, there was something Alicia Garza, who was one of the co-creators of the Black Lives Matter movement,
Mm-hmm.
um, said, I was at the Allied Media Conference and she delivered a keynote speech. And one part of her speech really struck with me, which was that we must commit to organizing in a way that transforms us.
Mm.
We must build a movement across difference for the sake of our collective transformation. We must build movements that restore humanity to all of us, even those of us who have been inhumane.
Mm.
Movements of the places where people are called to be transformed in the service of their own liberation and the liberation of others. And that just really stuck with me because I keep it by my desk. Because I think that's what's being required of us at this time. That as we work to create change in our own little spheres, and everyone does that in different ways in their life, as we work to bring our own unique medicine out into the world, we're being asked to understand that's going to require us to transform, and that's also going to mean that we have to recognize that we're all transforming.
Yeah.
And that no one is expendable. No one should just be sort of tossed aside or thought of as evil or can never be helped. That we're going to essentially, as one of the things my teacher likes to say, is that we will do this together or not at all.
Yeah.
So my vision is that we can all learn skills that allow us to do that important work of withdrawing our projections and engaging with our lives as a teacher and engaging with healing, bringing healing to the trauma of our past so we can come back together, even with people who might have wounded us in the past or represent peoples who have wounded us historically in a way that allows us to work together to create a new future.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's beautiful. Finally, I would love to know if people are listening and they feel really inspired, would like to learn more about you, how can they work with you currently? What are you offering and where can people find you?
Right now, the next thing I'm offering is the Healing Your Triggers class in February.
Mm-hmm.
So they can find me at occupied-your-heart.com.
Mm-hmm.
And you can sign up for the mailing list there. And there's a ebook on creating healthy boundaries, which you get if you sign up for the mailing list, which you might be interested in. But essentially, Healing Your Triggers is a 5-week class on using some of these emotional clearing techniques I've been talking about, both on your own and in partnership with others outside of class, that like partnership with other members of the class. And you learn to embody these skills in a way that you can take them into your life, that you can learn to bring compassionate curiosity and presence to the stuck places and challenges inside of yourself and begin to really do that work of clearing them at the root so they no longer affect your present experience.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And can people work with you one-on-one as well? Is that possible over distance?
Yes, they can. So people can work with me both in person or over a distance. And I don't find that there's some differences in pros and cons to both ways of working, but both ways are equally powerful, I find. And so people can, through my website, they can book a consultation with me for a shamanic healing session, which is free. And how that works generally is that once we have a conversation about what they're wanting to shift or transform in their life at this time, then I will go into trance afterwards, apart from the person, and enter into the spirit world and see what my helping spirits have to say about that and bring healing to wherever it's needed and aid their transformational process. And then we'll have another conversation afterwards when I send them the recording of the healing session where they can describe to me their experience of it and I can share with them sort of detailed follow-up steps for integrating
Mm-hmm.
whatever healing happened during the session.
Mm-hmm. That sounds
For
great.
the emotional clearing work, that's when that's one-on-one, that's live.
Mm-hmm.
We can do over either Skype or Google Hangout or via the phone.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Are there any social media channels that you enjoy and where people can connect with you as well?
Sure. On Instagram, I am at Occupy Your Heart.
Mm-hmm.
And on Facebook, you're welcome to friend me or check me out. I have a Facebook page for Occupy Your Heart, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm also on Facebook as Langston Kahn.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time as well and for sharing from your heart and for being here and for everything that you're doing in the world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. This is wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.